So I want you to imagine, just for a second, walking into a pristine, high-end art gallery.
Right, where it's so quiet you just hear your own footsteps echoing off those stark white walls.
Exactly. And you turn a corner, and suddenly you are standing in front of this massive, minimalist, abstract painting. And I think the immediate instinct for most of us is to view this through a really romantic, almost cinematic lens.
Oh, absolutely. We see pure emotional chaos.
Yeah. We picture the artist alone in this visceral trance, like caught in a frenzy of inspiration, just throwing paint at a canvas and hoping the disaster somehow captures a feeling.
Right, it's the classic enduring myth of the tortured genius. I mean, we love that narrative, don't we? That art is just this uncontrolled explosion of the soul.
We really do.
Yeah.
But as we're going to see today, the reality of a master studio is, well, it's something completely different.
It really is. The closed-door process of true contemporary mastery is actually pure engineering. It is chemistry and physics basically operating in the background, but cleverly disguised as free expression.
And that massive shift in perspective is exactly what we're exploring today in this deep dive. We're looking closely at the incredibly detailed documentation and methods of the art collective GRUPO RAIIM.
Yeah, specifically focusing on the insights of masters like Laura Palacios and Rodolfo Im.
Right. And our goal here is to completely deconstruct how a professional transforms a blank space into a gallery-ready piece using immense restraint, this invisible strategy, and literally just 3 colors.
Which is mind-blowing when you think about it. But to understand how a master thinks, we really have to start with the same visual problem they face on day one. We have to look at the artist's greatest enemy.
The paralyzing void of the white canvas.
Exactly. Picture a 60 by 80 centimeter immaculate white canvas just resting there on an easel.
I mean, for anyone who has ever tried to create something, a painting, writing, anything, the psychological weight of that visual abyss is heavy. It doesn't just look like an empty space. To the human brain, it feels like a threat.
It does, because the human brain just has this survival level aversion to the void. And the instinctive reaction to that intimidation is to just attack the canvas immediately.
Just to get anything on there.
Right. The amateur believes that visual disorder will magically generate emotional impact. They want to kill the fear by filling the space as fast as possible.
You know, I actually think of that chaotic approach like someone trying to cook hot cuisine without a plan.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, like imagine taking all your raw, completely unprepared ingredients, throwing them into a boiling pot all at the exact same time, cranking the heat up to maximum,
Right.
and just praying it tastes like a Michelin star meal.
Right, which never works.
Never. You don't get a masterpiece. You just end up with an inedible, oversaturated mess.
Exactly, because before color can actually sing, there has to be a geometric and architectural foundation. I mean, gravity must be established on the canvas.
So you can't just throw pigment into a void and expect it to hold weight.
Precisely. And this is where we see Laura Palacios' method come into play. The master does not start with those vibrant, expressive colors right away.
Right. The documentation shows something completely different. First, they take a brush and paint the entire canvas with a heavy, completely opaque layer of black acrylic.
They essentially turn off the lights in the room, and then, and this is key, they wait. They let the black dry entirely.
Until it's cold to the touch, right?
Yes, and once it is, they draw a strict mathematical grid. We're talking 12 perfect 20 by 20 centimeter squares. Finally, they mask the borders of those squares with standard 24 millimeter paper tape.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop you there. You're losing me a little bit. Rulers. A mathematical grid. Hardware store masking tape.
I know, it sounds crazy.
It sounds more like prepping a bathroom for a fresh coat of paint than creating high art. Doesn't locking the canvas down with strict geometry completely assassinate the creative, expressive soul of the artwork?
Well, our instinct tells us that art requires uninhibited freedom, sure, but cognitive psychology reveals a totally different mechanism at play here. What we are seeing with the tape is actually a brilliant manipulation of what psychologists call extrinsic cognitive load.
Okay, extrinsic cognitive load. How does that apply to putting paint on a canvas?
Well, think about the last time you tried to draw a perfectly straight line freehand.
Oh man, I probably held my breath the entire time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your hand cramped up. Your brain was expending massive amounts of neurological energy just doing the micro math required to keep your hand steady and stay inside an imaginary boundary. It is physically exhausting.
Right, so you're entirely focused on just not making a mistake rather than actually creating anything expressive.
You nailed it. But by delegating that spatial worry to an inanimate object, the paper tape, the brain just relaxes. The tape acts as a blindfold for the artist's anxiety.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so 100% of their neurological energy is now free to focus exclusively on how the colors interact within that protected zone.
That is fascinating. So the boundary actually creates the freedom.
It really does. Think of a classical sonnet in poetry. A sonnet imposes this tyrannical 14-line structure. It dictates the exact rhythm, rhyme, and meter.
Right, super rigid.
But that strict limitation is exactly what forces the poet to search deeper, finding vastly more creative word combinations to fit inside that mold. The tape on the canvas is the architecture that allows the color to explode.
I love that. True artistic freedom isn't the absence of rules. It is the spectacular vitality that occurs inside a perfectly engineered structural limitation.
Exactly. When you view it through that lens, a roll of cheap masking tape becomes an instrument of profound liberation.
So, okay, we have our architecture. The black grid is taped off. Now, if I'm standing in that studio, the overwhelming visceral urge at this exact moment is instant gratification.
Well, of course.
I have these black squares, and I want to grab a giant brush, load it with vibrant red, and just scrub it in furiously to see that contrast immediately.
And surrendering to that urge leads straight into what professionals call the mud trap. It is the absolute deadliest error for beginners.
So what is physically happening on the canvas when someone falls into this mud trap?
Well, it is the direct consequence of painting wet on wet out of pure impatience. If that black base layer is still holding on to microscopic moisture-like, if the polymers are still evaporating, and you aggressively apply bright red over it, you aren't simply layering.
You're mixing them.
Worse, a molecular clash occurs. The pigments contaminate one another.
Oh, and I know from the sources, the red loses its physical ability to reflect light, right?
Oh.
It turns into this dirty, opaque gray.
Exactly. And if you try to apply white over it, it degrades into a sad, dull pink. By rushing, you literally annihilate the light of the painting.
Which brings us to the principle Rodolfo M. documents so clearly. The master operates under the tyranny of patience.
The tyranny of patience, yes. If you want vibrant, living color, you have to layer dry on dry. No exceptions. The master waits until that black universe is completely petrified. Only then do they load a flat brush with red vermilion.
But from the documentation, it's not like they paint it like a solid, impenetrable wall either.
Right, no. They drag the brush loosely, deliberately allowing these microscopic dark fissures of the black background to survive and kind of peek through the red.
Well, let me ask you this from the perspective of someone just trying to paint this. What if I step back from the easel and feel like the red is too weak? My immediate instinct is to grab more fresh red paint and slap it right on top to force it to pop. Why is that forbidden?
Because doing that while the first layer of red is still wet destroys the paint's refractive index. The magic the master is harnessing here relies on a very specific optical phenomenon called simultaneous contrast.
Okay, take us inside the physics of that. How does simultaneous contrast actually trick the eye?
So, black absorbs light, right? It creates a visual void. Red vermilion bounces light. By leaving those tiny black cracks breathing around the edges of the red pigment, the human brain suffers an optical illusion.
Really? Just from the cracks?
Yes. The contrast is so sharp and so highly localized that the red actually vibrates on the retina. It appears to possess a much higher saturation and intensity than the pigment physically holds in the tube.
Wow, so it creates an internal glow, essentially.
Exactly. But if you panic, if you add wet paint on top of wet paint, trying to force that saturation, you flatten the illusion completely.
It's just too much at once.
Right. Trying to paint quickly and mix everything out of anxiety is like mashing all the keys on a piano at the exact same time and expecting to hear a Beethoven sonata.
You just get noise.
It is just noise. Every single note of color needs its silent time to dry before the next one is played.
That is so poetic. The master understands they're not just painting with acrylics. They are painting with time. Patience is the active catalyst used to capture light.
Beautifully said. Time is literally a physical ingredient on the canvas.
Okay, so we have this strict geometry. We have this vibrating red color pulsing against the deep black. But at this stage, the artwork is entirely flat, isn't it? It is two-dimensional, almost like a printed poster.
It is, and when you stand in front of high-end abstract minimalism, it demands a tactile physical dimension. It needs to cast a shadow. It requires three-dimensional tension.
But if you try to build that texture using just watery standard school acrylics and a normal brush, you fail. I mean, a brush just caresses and distributes. Watery paint just succumbs to gravity, and spills flat.
Right, so we have to introduce the mechanics of fluid and mass.
And here, the master introduces the third element,
Yeah.
white. But they do not use white as a flat color. They use it as a heavy, dense mass, and the brush is banished entirely. The documentation reveals the tool of choice is a metal spatula, or, and this is wild R, rigid plastic school ruler. Wait, here's where it gets really interesting. A plastic school ruler, like from a kid's pencil case. How on earth can a cheap piece of plastic replace a tempered steel fine art tool to sculpt a gallery masterpiece?
It sounds totally absurd until you examine the fluid mechanics involved. The master is using professional heavy-body acrylic, and this material possesses a physical property known as yield stress.
Yield stress. How does yield stress work in this context?
Think of the difference between trying to build a tiny mountain out of milk versus building one out of stiff whipped cream.
Okay, the milk immediately collapses under its own weight.
Right. But heavy-body acrylic acts like the whipped cream. It has the physical capacity to hold a three-dimensional shape without drooping from gravity. So the dramatic volume you see on the canvas is not created by the prestige or the price tag of a steel tool.
Ah, I see.
It is created by the sheer force of a rigid edge.
The magic is in the angle and the friction, not the instrument itself.
Exactly. If you hold that rigid plastic ruler at a 45-degree angle and drag it across the canvas, it performs the exact same kinematic work as a tempered steel spatula. It fractures the dense white mass, it cuts and pushes the acrylic, leaving these incredible dramatic peaks and valleys, revealing the dry black beneath through pure friction.
But the sources do mention a very real danger here, though. You are pressing down with a rigid object onto a stretched elastic canvas. If you press too hard with that ruler,
You press the canvas right against the wooden stretcher bars behind it.
and you permanently scar the artwork, right?
Yes, you leave a physical imprint of the wood embedded in the painting. The process is an incredibly delicate dance. The tool must almost float on the tension of the canvas, applying just enough sheer force to sculpt the fluid mass, but not enough to damage the foundation.
I can just imagine the tactile sensation of doing this. Dragging that heavy white mass, feeling the resistance, seeing those chaotic textures form. I mean, it must be incredibly satisfying. The natural instinct would be to just keep scraping, to spread that violent white texture absolutely everywhere.
And knowing exactly when to stop is the true mark of the master. You must balance the violence of the white texture, the vibrating flatness of the red, and the architectural void of the black.
It requires immense restraint.
Totally. The black void is not unfinished space. It is the visual oxygen of the painting.
Visual oxygen. I love that.
Yeah, because the human eye fatigues very quickly if it is only presented with noise, heavy texture, and bright color. The eye needs a place to rest. If the artist gives in to the urge and covers the black entirely with white texture, they literally asphyxiate the composition.
So a masterpiece really is an ecosystem of contrasts. Its power doesn't come from saturating every inch of space, but from the elegant, breathless tension of what the artist chooses to leave empty.
It is the invisible scaffolding beneath the emotion.
So when you synthesize this whole journey, the mystic, romantic aura of the frantic, impulsive genius kind of fades away. But it reveals something far more profound. We aren't looking at chaos. We're looking at a highly disciplined system of physical laws.
Yes, the tape is geometry utilized to cure cognitive anxiety. The agonizing drying time is chemistry utilized to protect the light's refractive index. And the rigid ruler is fluid mechanics applied to craft physical shadows.
And submitting to this rigorous process is what actually unlocks genuine expressive freedom. I feel like anyone listening to this deep dive will walk into a gallery and see minimalist painting completely differently.
You really will. You stop seeing random chaos. You start seeing the deliberate, engineered restraint. You see the physics, the weighting, and the silent choices.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with. If the true, breathtaking vitality of an abstract painting doesn't come from an impulsive attack, but from having the immense, almost painful discipline to let each individual layer dry completely.
It forces us to look at how we operate outside the studio, doesn't it?
Exactly. Think about it. How many of our own personal projects, our businesses, or our complex relationships fail simply because we let anxiety win? We panic at the sight of the void. We try to mix all the phases together at once, refusing to grant each stage its silent, indispensable drying time. We attack the empty space because we are afraid of it. So maybe true mastery isn't acting on pure impulse. Maybe it is having the courage to step back, appreciate the architecture of the moment, and wait patiently for the light to catch.